Hi everyone, this video is going to go over how to divide, multiply and divide positive and negative decimals. So the nice thing is you actually already know how to do both of the things that you'll need to know how to do to put together in order to be able to multiply and divide decimal numbers. The first thing is knowing whether or not your answer is going to be positive or negative. You're actually going to use the same positive and negative rules for multiplying and dividing integers as you will for decimals. And those rules, just to refresh your memory a little bit, when the signs are the same, the answer comes out to be positive. So two positives multiplied or divided together will give you a positive answer, and two negatives multiplied or divided together will give you a positive answer. When the signs are different, though, when you multiply or divide a positive with a negative, doesn't matter the order, the answer is going to be a negative answer. So again, just use the same rules as multiplying and dividing integers for multiplying and dividing decimal positives and negatives. You also already know how to multiply and divide positive decimal numbers, so you're just going to take those two pieces of information and put them together. As a quick review, multiplying decimals, you start off by multiplying as if they were whole numbers, so you just ignore the decimal. Then you count the number of decimal places total in the problem, and you have to match that in the answer. In the example shown here, 2 and 34 hundredths times 1 and 2 tenths, the answer was done for you. And you'll notice that in the first factor, 2 and 34 hundredths, there's 2 decimal places. Decimal places are the number of digits that come after the decimal. So there's both a 3 in the tenths place, a 4 in the hundredths place. That's 2 decimal places. 1 and 2 tenths has 1 decimal place. That's a total of 3 decimal places. So you start at the end of your total and you count back 3, and that's where your decimal goes. So now to multiply with negative decimal numbers, you just combine those two separate rules. So here we have the example, negative 5 and 9 tenths times negative 9 and 7 tenths. The first thing I notice is that we're multiplying two negatives, so I know my answer is going to be a positive. So I can just put a little reminder here, my answer is going to be positive. I don't need to put those negatives into the work that I'm doing because that just kind of gives me too much stuff, clutters it. So I'll just write 5 and 9 tenths times 9 and 7 tenths. So we'll start off by multiplying how we normally would, ignoring the decimals. We start off with the bottom number, smallest place, and multiply it by each of the places above, going from the smallest to the largest. 7 times 9 is 63, so I put my 3 and carry the 6. 7 times 5 is 35, and then you add that 6 that you had carried. 35 plus 6 is 41. I am now done with the tenths place, and I'm done with this 6 that I regrouped, so now I can move on to the next place. To show that we are moving over one place, we need to put a 0 placeholder into the next partial product. 9 times 9 is 81, so I'll put my 1 here, carry the 8 up above the 5. 9 times 5 is 45, plus 8 more is 53. We add partial products. 3, 2, 7, 5. Now we just have to go in and count how many total decimal places there are. I see that there is 1 decimal place in 5 and 9 tenths and 1 decimal place in 9 and 7 tenths for a total of 2. So that would be 1, 2 decimal places, and my decimal goes in between the 7 and 2. I made a note that my answer was positive, so here I can just write the final answer. 57 and 23 hundredths. The next example is two positives. When you have the number with less digits in the front, I usually reverse the order. It's okay to do because the commutative property does work with multiplication. So I'm going to put the number with more digits on the top. It's just a little bit easier for me. And the number with fewer digits on the bottom. Okay, we start off by ignoring the decimals, multiply the bottom number first, starting with the smallest place by each of the places above. 5 times 6 is 30, so I'll write my 0 in the answer and regroup or carry the 3. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 more is 13. Here we have 5 times 5 is 25, plus 1 is 26. And I am now done with the 5, and I'm done with the 3 and the 1 that I've already regrouped. I'm moving over to the next place. So to show that I'm moving to the next place, I'll put a 0 placeholder and continue on by multiplying 4 by each number above. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 2 plus 2 is 10. And 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. We'll add these partial products. And now we just need to count those decimal places. There are 2 in the first factor and 1 in the second for a total of 3. So that would be 1, 2, 3. My answer will be 23 and 67 hundredths. There is no need for that 0 on the end of the number, so I'll leave that off. They are equivalent, but we don't need to show it. And then the last example with multiplication is 3 factors. So we'll start off by multiplying 2 of them. We've got 1 and 6 tenths multiplied by 5 tenths. It may help you to think about 5 tenths as being 1/2. So you're taking half of 1 and 6 tenths. This is actually mental math, but I'll go ahead and do the work so that you can see. 6 times 5 is 30. 5 times 1 is 5. Add the other 3 and we get 8. There are 2 decimal places here in our factors. So there's got to be 2 decimal places in the answer, and that works out to be 8 tenths or 80 hundredths. So this was a positive times a negative, so I know that this is going to be negative. Now these 2 I've done already, and now I'm multiplying 80 hundredths or 8 tenths times negative 20. I know that a negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so I'm just multiplying here 20 times 8 tenths. I can ignore that decimal, and that is just 20 times 8. 2 times 8 is 16. Annex or plop that 0 on the end, and then go back and put my decimal place, which is 1, and I've got a total of 16. The answer is going to be positive because when I originally multiplied these 2 numbers, I came up with a negative, and then a negative times a negative will be a positive. Decimal division is, again, just combining the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. You're going to use the exact same rules for dividing with decimals, and you're going to divide how you have already learned. Basically, if there is only a decimal in the dividend, which would be in the house, according to this picture, you just bring it up into the answer right above where it is in the problem. If there's a decimal on the side in the divisor, we want to make that a whole number. So we're going to multiply by 10, which is just a shift of the decimal. We'll shift that right. However many places we have to shift the decimal in the divisor to the right, we have to do the exact same thing to the decimal in the dividend. For our first example, we have 6 and 4 tenths divided by negative 3 and 2 tenths. I know that my answer is going to turn out to be a negative because I've got a positive divided by a negative. We'll first move the decimal in the divisor to the right 1 place because the decimal comes at the end of a whole number and we have to make this a whole number. And then if I do that to the divisor, I have to do the exact same thing to the dividend. So this now, I will rewrite it because I don't like all those arrows in my work. This now is 64 divided by negative 32. To me, I can see that I double 3 to get 6 and I double 2 to get 4. So this is mental math. I know the answer is 2, but I also know that it is a negative 2 because it's positive divided by a negative. The next example is negative 15 and 4 tenths divided by negative 2.5, 2 and 5 tenths. I'm going to leave the negatives out of it and just come back to those at the end so that I know it's already going to be a positive because it's a negative time divided by a negative. So we'll put 15 and 4/10 in the dividend because that's what is being divided up. And we are dividing that by 2 and 5/10. When there is a decimal in the divisor on the side, we have to make it a whole number. So we'll shift it as many times as needed in order to get it behind the numbers, making it a whole number. That would be 1 here. Same thing on the divisor. And I'll rewrite the problem so that the arrows and the decimals do not confuse me or add any clutter to what I'm working with. So here I've got 154 divided by 25. So I'm instantly thinking of money. I know that 25 is the value of a quarter, and I see that I want to know how many times I would multiply 25 by to get 154. Well, I also know that 154 is really close to an amount I can get with quarters, 150. I know it takes 4 quarters just to get to 100, and 50 cents would be 2 more quarters. So I know that 25 times 6 is 150. So I'll go ahead and put my 6 here. And the next step to long division would be to multiply 25 times 6, and I already know that that's 150. We subtract to find the difference, the leftover, which is 4. When we're working with decimals, we don't want a remainder. We can't just put a remainder 4. So what we do is we actually put a decimal behind the dividend, and now we can put a 0. It does not change the value of the number. 154 is exactly the same as 154.0, but I've got something that I can now bring down to keep going. I know that 25 times 2 is 50, and I only have 40 to work with, so I'll put first of all, I'll put my decimal in the answer right above where it is in the dividend. And I know that 25 will only go into 40 one time. 25 times 1 is 25. I'll subtract to find the leftover. I know that that is 15. I still don't want any leftover, so I'll put another 0 in order to have that to bring down. Now I can repeat. 25 goes into 150. I already solved this. I know that that is exactly 6 times. 6 times 25 is 150. And I finally get that remainder of 0, which is good. And my final answer is 6 16/100. And because it was a negative divided by a negative, my answer is going to be a positive. Same signs, the answer is positive. And then for our last example, we have negative 5 4/10 divided by 3. In this example, there is not a decimal shown for the divisor. It already is a whole number, so we don't have to shift here. When there is just a decimal in the dividend, we just bring it up right above wherever it is in the problem. 3 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. We subtract to get 2 and bring down the 4 to repeat. 3 goes into 24 8 times. 8 times 3 is 24. We subtract. There is nothing left over, so our answer is done. I just have to go back and make sure whether it is positive or negative. 2 different signs means it's going to be a negative answer, negative 1 8/10.